We're live on Facebook. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone in the U.S. and around the world. Thanks for joining us today on a great episode. And let me tell you, this is going to be a dandy one. You're going to love it. I'm going way outside my comfort zone and outside the box. As always, we delve into the scenes of baseball analytics with one of the best, Ari Kaplan. Let me tell you, I think he's the reason I've got to study more. So I'm going to blame him on that part. So I'm trying to keep up with these guys. They're really good. He's the leader of sports analytics at Data Robot, the leading enterprise artificial platform which works with pro teams in all sports, even in England. They have some business out there. He's well known for creating and leading the Chicago Cubs analytics department. He helped bring Theo Epstein to the Cubs. And listen, I hope he got a World Series ring for that because he deserves it. In 2013, 2018, assistant GM of the Orioles in charge of analytics for game strategy, drafting, player trades, scouting, and player development. And that'll be interesting because I want to talk to him about each one of those topics, how analytics is used. The Orioles in the first 5 years had the best record in the American League and 3 playoff appearances. Well, that's just a short part of his bio. Let me welcome Ari Kaplan. Ari, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Hi, Peter. Hi, everyone around the world.
Yes, and we do have, we're going to have, matter of fact, we're going to have people live on Facebook from around the world. They join us all the time. And I know this is going to be, especially because we get a variety of coaches, players, parents, experts in the game at really different levels. So sometimes, I might ask you a question about, if you have a high school coach or if you have a, even a travel coach, what's the best way for them to use some of this information? Obviously, at the big league level, they have a lot of information. So we're going to delve into that. And folks on Facebook, do me a favor. If you got any questions, just type them in the comment section. And we already wrote that for you so you can see it. And also, don't forget, do us a favor. We got 90 plus shows on YouTube. They're all free. All we ask is you just hit the subscribe button. Go to Peter Caliendo on YouTube, hit subscribe. That would help us out. It helps get the show out and also helps get more people following the show. And let me tell you, we've got great guests. Just go to it. You'll see it. I mean, Clint Hurdle, Ron Washington, Tom House. It just keeps going on. And today, to me, it's one of the most important topics because you see it all the time on MLB Network with Brian Kenny, all the analytical stuff going on out there. So, Ari, let's just start it off. How did you ever get started in this? Because I think analytics started, maybe 10, 15 years ago, at least in baseball.
Yeah, so and from the analytics front, there's been different phases, but I started in the late 1980s. I was an undergraduate at Caltech, which people know now as that Big Bang Theory school.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of my life. I just kind of was a big baseball fan, all the way through high school, growing up in New Jersey, went to Caltech, realized that some of the pitching and offensive stats were not the most accurate. If you get a win or a loss, it's partly due to your team scoring runs while you pitch, a little bit out of your hands. And a lot of people realized statistics weren't the most accurate, predictive, or it's a team sport. It depends on others. And I didn't just complain about it. I came up with a bunch of metrics. Every time you hear the word expected, like expected earned run average, expected batting average, was something I kind of came up with back in the 80s. So instead of just complaining, there were problems that everyone knew about, came up with new metrics, got a bit of notice, like I was on the Today Show, Brian Gumbel, and CNN, and then a near miracle happened in that Fred Clare, the listeners may know, is the GM of the Dodgers.
Been on the show. Yep.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's been my lifetime, like one of my big mentors. But he heard about me. It was in the LA Times, and he tracked me down. Back then, there were no mobile phones. So he called me on my dorm. Imagine I'm a teenager still. And my dorm mate's like, oh, the GM of the Dodgers wants to talk to you. I had no idea if they were pranking me or nothing. But yeah, he talked and said, I think what you have to do might be able to help me make, trade decisions and help with the players. Do you have time in the next couple of weeks to come in? And I said, how about in 1.5 hours? And I like raced down there before he could change his mind. And later that day, I went from being, just a typical college kid to meeting with Eddie Murray, John Wetland, Mike Scioscia, a lot of incredible players. And they understood, you're a pitcher, your team, you leave the game and your reliever allows a couple runs, you don't get the win. They totally got it. So that's kind of how I started. And then, I'll let you talk, but, we could talk.
Well, no, as soon as you mentioned, the time and coming out of college and meeting Fred Claire, like I said, Fred's been on the show. He's outstanding. And quick story. I wrote a note to Fred Claire when I was running the pilot program for USA Baseball, which was our national team for 16U. We were going to Japan to play in the World Cup. At that time, I believe the World Cup, I think it was. I wrote him a letter, here I am 24, 25 years old. So listen, we're stopping in LA. Can we practice at Dodger Stadium before we go to Japan? Thinking, he's never going to write back. Well, he wrote back and we practiced there and he had everything ready for us. He had no clue who I was. So yeah, great person. But here's my question. We're talking about way before Moneyball here. You should have been the one they're making a movie about here.
Yeah, well, the Moneyball was like, a dozen years later. So when I started, Fred helped me get started. I ended up working with him, with Frank Robinson and Roland Heeman with the Orioles. But back then, people didn't have like any information. If you can imagine, no mobile phones, no email. The internet had only 400 or 500 websites. So we had to like do our own research. And back then, I can only think of 5 people that were consulting or full-time with teams, of myself, Bill James, Pete Palmer, Eddie Epstein, Craig Wright. But yeah, so the interesting thing back then is what we were doing was kind of so new in many ways that it was a big competitive advantage. So for example, with the Orioles, my first job was Earl Weaver index card program. Earl Weaver, people think of as kicking dirt in umpires and spinning, right. But he was a genius. He was one of the innovators in analytics in that he said a lefty batter versus a lefty pitcher. How do you construct your lineup? Do you bring in a lefty or righty reliever? And people don't realize it, but he was one of the first to do that, and he got slammed by the media, by players. People said you're ruining the game, but he said, I'm going to win. And the media is going to like me when I start winning.
And look where we are today. Everybody, and how it is. Once you make those changes, baseball's always been slow at change and, very traditional. And anytime anybody went the other way, boy, they started criticizing. And that's what I like that you got into that because I want to ask you about that. So when you got into, I wanted to know what kind of things you did in those days. And one of them is helping construct the lineup. But were there times then where, because, I saw this internationally a lot, where, a right-handed hitter would come in, but they would throw a right-handed pitcher for a particular reason. Would that happen then?
Yeah, so you use it, back then and today, you use like these statistics as a guide, not as like the primary driver. So like so teams that were not as smart would just follow the book rules of statistics and say, there's a lefty pitcher, I'm going to stack, my lineup.
Right.
But sometimes there's a pitcher that has a Gooden has a great curveball. So you stack your lineup with batters that can hit a curveball. So sometimes it's not just lefty righty, but pitch types of the pitchers, and other considerations.
What other things during that time were being used that, I'm trying to get an idea of the understanding back then, some of the things, that you started with, because look where we are now.
Yeah, so back then it was, even Ted Williams had handcrafted this chart of what his batting average was for each zone in the strike zone. He had to do that by hand. So when I was working back in the late 80s, early 90s, we had to do things like that by hand. So how do you construct a lineup? What's your batting order? Who should start? In the middle of the game, who should you pinch hit in what situation? And again, it's a guide. If the manager has his own thoughts. It's just one of the inputs. And even back then, a little bit of defensive positioning, it was kind of looked down on, and even today still, but you could still kind of pull the outfielders in or out. You could instruct your runner on third base in a sac fly opportunity. And teams did have smart advanced scouts, but it was a bit more anecdotal. But if you could measure how strong an arm an outfielder is, or record how far he was able to throw to the plate, you could use that to your advantage. Also, something that is one of the best information is, are there any patterns that a pitcher has in sequencing? Does a pitcher double up on their curve? And teams incorporate advanced scouts that watch players and record that. But teams typically have hired 1 or 2 advanced scouts. So you're going to be really good for the games you saw, but you're going to be blind to other games. You're also players that were called up. I remember, like with the Cubs, this was like 2010-11 when sensors and stuff were just being put in the minor leagues. If somebody got called up with the opponent, you don't have that advanced scouting report on them. But with analytics, you now do, and you can say, this runner likes to steal in this certain situation. This batter, is really challenged by cut fastballs, and you can get that for the minor leagues. So over the years and over the decades, it's kind of how things progressed. And
nowadays you can input, obviously the computers do everything. The information's inputted, the computers spit it all out how you want it. Back then you didn't have that. So you had to input it by hand or write it down by hand. And then what, you had to figure all this out?
Yeah. So at first I did everything like I was a one-person show. Get everything by hand, watch the games, do play-by-plays, which were not really even available. You just had the end-of-game box score, listen to broadcasts, recreate it. And then I would write what's called a database, which, on a computer, look at every play. And then I think we're another area where, I helped add value was in scouting. So back then, scouts would write things by hand on paper and mail it into the front office. So you'd have a file cabinet, like you have all the books behind you now, with thousands and thousands of scouting reports, and basically they'd be read when a GM was about to consider a trade. They would kind of pull it up alphabetically, and most of the time, information would just sit there unread. So I made a database where the general manager can scan through every single scouting report, like thousands of them, and just say, which third baseman got the best, grades from my scouts, or what are the top prospects in the Royals organization with the highest upside according to what the scouts graded. And it was simple enough that the general manager themselves could run the query. The scouts actually loved it, since number one, their reports are being read like 10 times as much as they were before. Mm-hmm. So their value went up, their feeling of self-worth went up, but the GM can now kind of scan through thousands of reports and ask questions that and get answers and insights that they couldn't before. It would have taken weeks to do before.
Ari, back then, and still a little bit today, you still hear it. Obviously back then that was like taboo probably when you guys first started. It was like, these guys are nuts. We don't need this stuff. The typical comments that will come out, old, I don't want to use the word old school, but let's just use it to use it as a term. Because, in those days too, and I'm going to say it, you don't have to, there's the old boys network that was going on back then. They'd hire people they know only, and, they didn't really hire. How was that? How did you feel? I mean, it couldn't be easy. Now the Orioles took you in, obviously, but how did it feel like when you were talking to other teams?
Yeah, well, there are like two main types of people. There are people that were extremely hostile, and you couldn't even get them into a conversation for them to even know what they were saying no to.
Right.
I don't even want to investigate. I don't want to even hear about it. I don't want to see you. I don't care. And then you would have, some people like Fred Clare, or Jerry Krause, who's a scout but also the GM of the Bulls. I'm missing tons of people. Dan Duquette, my boss for many years, who just legitimately wanted to better their organization, and they would listen, and then they would decide this could help me, this can't, or even the better person, this helps me a little, but if you do, take this next step, it'll help me a lot. So most people, we're I don't know if closed-minded is the right word, but we're not ready to go that way. But those that did, the Roland Hemans, Fred Clairs of the world, as long as I had one person to work with, it was a great experience. It was worthwhile.
Well, today we still have, and it happens, it takes time. Even, I'm one that needs to take time when I make some changes. I agree. Even in baseball today, as far as from the coaching standpoint, there's the unwritten rules in baseball. One of them is you don't make the first or third out at third base. Well, Joe Mann threw that out the window. I agree with him because you take away aggressiveness, but you still have people that say don't do that. My question is this: as times are going and we get the Moneyball, I had my very good friend Ken Medlock. I mentioned a shout out to Ken. He played Grady Fusion in Moneyball, and he's perfect for that role. A lot was said back then because teams had fired a lot of scouts after Moneyball came out, thinking, well, I don't need scouts. I just use all the statistics. I think the good GMs, or the ones that understand it really well, know that you've got to use both the human aspect and the statistical part if you're going to do your best.
Yeah, totally. And people may not know, but I'm also having created the Cubs analytics department and doing similar with the Dodgers.
Yeah, did you get a World Series ring?
I did not. No.
Oh, I'm writing it, Theo. I'm going to get a thing going on here. How could you not get
not yet? But it is. Normally, you don't talk about things, but yeah, the owner, the Ricketts family, did talk to a couple outlets that I was the owner's right-hand man, and during that search, we looked at dozens and dozens of existing former GMs, assistant GMs, scouting directors, people in the commissioner's office, to try to get it. And yeah, we kept, I did the analysis of how did they do in the draft? How did they as a GM or executive perform in the draft? How did they perform in free agents? How did they build culture? And Theo's name, kept rising to the top, and then helping with the negotiation process. It was kind of interesting trading, players even for an executive. Only happened a few times in baseball history, but yeah, so I would say not yet. But trying to remember, So back to the scout. So I've been also a major league scout in addition to the analytics. Helped with some really key decisions. Hunter Pence was the tiebreaker for calling him up to the majors. That's a whole nother story if you want the next 40 minutes.
Yeah, because I think most scouts, I don't know, I shouldn't speak for them, but most people probably say, well, I don't know about Hunter Pence. That swing looks weird.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he's going to succeed at the big league level, right?
Yeah, so I'll do that story.
Yeah, go ahead.
You brought it up, and it deals with scouts and analytics and harmony. So my point is, having been a scout and having been the analyst, totally appreciate how things can work together. At the end of the day, it's information. And, hopefully, I'd love to talk about the future, dealing with artificial intelligence. But what I love about where the game is going and artificial intelligence is you can and should use scouting reports. And when I say that, I mean not just what their velocity is, but the scout saying, this player has a deceptive curveball, 12-6 with late tilt, pure, old school scouting. And that harmonizes with statistics. If you do it right and they work together to make predictions. Will this player be drafted? Will this player have a likelihood of making the majors? What are the weaknesses? So going back to Hunter Pence, so some of the scouts, you're exactly right. He's, not always built, they call him lanky, tall body. So some scouts thought, he might have a late or a long swing, and pitchers might adjust to him. Other scouts saw, the positivity, saying, he could, definitely be an everyday major league player. And of course, Tal Smith, Tim Purpura, Phil Gardner were like three of the folks. And it was basically a tie. They looked at me and said, Ari, what do you think? And they're like, we're a tie. You tell us what you think. And my, looking back was kind of interesting, since you usually don't say it, but I said, hey, give me a day or two, where they usually say, we want the answer now.
Right.
But I barely slept since he was in the minor leagues, a Round Rock Express AAA team. And I looked every time he faced the same pitcher within a game, or, across multiple games. Did he get better, or did the opposing pitcher get better? And then kind of in the context for, how does that compare to what's typical? What I found is he did get better every time he faced the same pitcher, but compared to other AAA players, it was like the top 1 or 2%. So my kind of feedback was, he is able to make adjustments. He's willing to make adjustments. And he's, in the top 1 or 2% of that. So, and he has the athletic ability to do so. So, I gave him a strong thumbs up. And then, and the rest is history. I actually got to tell this to him for the first time. I got it on videotape at the All-Star game last year.
Wow. Think about, talk about history or direction. The simple no could have made a huge difference in his career. We may have never seen him in the big leagues. It could happen.
Yeah. And one other story was Curt Schilling with the Baltimore Orioles. People don't recall he was even with them. Greg Olson was the closer. So Greg Olson, for the listeners that don't know, an elite, one of the best closers in the game for the year.
And one of the top 4 curveballs in the big leagues, I believe, right? I know Greg and his dad real well, but unbelievable curveball.
Yeah. His dad's great. Remind me of Ollie North, but that's another.
Yes.
In terms of look, at least. But so, and they had a good starting rotation. So the Orioles were actually going to release him. He was a mid-reliever. His ERA was, I forget, let's just say, 5 or 6. It was kind of below average. And I told Frank Robinson and Roland Heeman, you got to make him a starter. And they're like, no, our starting lineup's good. We're going to release him. And for all the players that year with the Orioles, he's the one and mind you, I'm a teenager. I had like almost no leverage. What's this young kid, telling us? I, was more shy then than I am now, but I stuck my neck out, said, you cannot release him. You have to make him a starter. He throws 4 pitch types. He can get through the, 3 times through the order. He has great athleticism. His mental, aggressiveness is off the charts, but, he mixes up pitches really intelligently. And they did not make him a starter, but they said, what, I see your passion. We just won't release him. We won't fire him. And then, but if they didn't do that, if they did release him, he probably would not have been picked up by another team, since his stats were good.
And if he did get picked up, now they'd look back and think, wow, what a mistake we made at that time.
Yeah.
Ari, I remember, and I want to get into what teams are doing now and also some of the future things coming up. But I remember, and the story in the paper, and again, it's in the newspaper, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. Curt Schilling, when Theo Epstein recruited Curt Schilling didn't like Wrigley because he felt that balls would fly out too easy there. But the Cubs convinced them, Theo and them, I'm assuming through statistics and analytics or whatever, convinced them that that's really not a true fact all the time. Is there some truth behind that? Do you know?
Yeah, whether it's like the green monster and left with Fenway, or wind blowing in and out at Wrigley, or just even having brick walls with no padding.
And excuse me, let me rephrase that. Not Curt Schilling. Who did they have to convince? Oh, that's right. When he went to Boston, right?
Fenway, yeah, same.
Yes, right. I said Wrigley. Yes, Fenway. Sorry.
But yeah, with the green monster, same concept, and balls could fly out. So that's one, key thing is that you don't want statistics to be general for every player. Every pitcher may not have the Fenway Green Monster effect. For example, if you're a ground ball pitcher, it doesn't really matter how far the outfield is for those ground balls. It's really only if you allow a lot of fly balls to left field. So yeah, you want to, so one of the things I did through most of my career was I came up with electronic spray charts. The first one to make it a digital spray chart. If you don't believe me, go to spraycharts.com. It'll refresh to my personal website. And I remember buying the website just since people say, you're out of your mind in the future. No way did you come up with spray charts. But I did. But anyway, I don't care for the credit, but fun side story. But you want to look at every ball put into play. So like with the Cubs, with the Orioles, you look at wind, you look at exit velocity, launch angle, and you'd say, if this pitcher were to pitch in my park, how would the stadium have affected him? In Oakland, lots of foul territory. They allow a lot of pop-ups that goes into the stands in other stadiums, might be an extra couple outs. If they hit the ball hard, one stadium versus the other, so you come up with a more fair assessment of how they would perform in your stadium. That's what you do, especially with pitchers. How would the stadium affect them?
Wow, talk about information that's so needed, because when you're talking about trades and other things. Now, you did mention, I believe that, when you guys were evaluating at the Cubs for a general manager, you used analytics to decide, to help you decide, who you're going to pick to see how well they performed. Does that happen in scouting? Do you evaluate scouts that way? Player development people? Is analytics used in all that to hire people? And also maybe if they're not doing well, to change their thinking?
Yeah, totally. So, I'll start with scouts. So, every person, as a scout has their strengths, and some have weaknesses. Just some have strengths, and some may just be neutral. So, like for me, I think I was better, or I am better at evaluating pitchers and maybe catchers. But I may just be average or below average at other positions. But for me, that was my strength. So what you could do is use analytics to look at scouts and see which scouts have had more success evaluating each, position. So some scouts might be really good at evaluating starters, and, so you can know that. And then in analytics, there's something called normalization, which means, maybe, the scouts grade things on the scale of 20 to 80, 80 being, Hall of Fame, all-star players. But a 65 to me might be a little different than a 65 to you. So you could either use analytics to kind of calibrate scouts so they're like talking about the same thing, or, what I would do, working with scouting directors is, get together as people and talk about what is a 65 grade. And come up with examples of actual players who are 65, just so all scouts are calibrated. You could use analytics to help figure out which scouts are good, or kind of tweak their numbers so everyone's on the same scale. Also, for general managers, also for scouting directors, but you want to do it in the right context. So if you're a team where you get a lot of supplemental picks in the draft, in extra players in early rounds, you want, you want to take that into account. You don't want to penalize scouting directors that, had low picks. So that's where analytics can help. If you work for a team that has a lot of money and can fail on a couple free agents versus, you're the Pirates, every free agent has to, almost everyone has to be right for you to be successful. You want to kind of calibrate that. Also, analytics have been helpful for evaluating major league managers. So way back, even Jim Riggleman with the Cubs, before I joined them full time, helped Ed Lynch evaluate him based on what they could control. So what were were some of their in-game tactics? How did the coaching staff they hired, like their pitching coach, as pitchers came onto the team, did they get better? Did they tend to get injured more? Was the injury, a freak box cutter injury, or was it, is everyone getting shoulder issues? These are types of things analytics can help you look at. Again, you could always do this as a human, but analytics can help you, automate it and sometimes find, a little bit more of the nuances and information.
Absolutely. It's no different than in coaching. In coaching, I'm teaching a young kid something about hitting. I'm looking at his motion. Yes, I've got some video possibly, but I've got an idea, and we all know our eyes work at 30 frames per second. There's high-speed cameras at 1,000, and I'm looking, and I think I know what he's doing wrong, and I may be right, but I'm also guessing in some ways, maybe through experience, but with analytics and, I get an idea here now when I look at the analytical part, it's going to pretty much tell me I was correct or I was wrong or I'm off a little bit. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And there's a lot of new technologies like, Rapsodo, Edgertronic, K Motion, Blast Motion, K-Vest, and many others. And you could have high, frequency, high definition video capture. And that's really helpful. And I know there's like high school, college, youth coaches listening to your podcast, but you could slow it down to what is the grip on a change or, fastball. And you could, while you're doing practice, try adjusting your grip, seeing how it changes the spin, direction, angle, your command. So that's kind of more as a coaching tool than analytic tool. But then you can use it as analytics. When you start getting a couple hundred pitches, you could start teasing out, what's more important than something else in the mechanics for you as an individual. And to me, that's the beauty of analytics is you want to go from like an aggregation, meaning you're giving a general rule, have your launch angle this rate, or, lower your elbow. But in reality, every athlete, is a different person, different, body makeup, different mental makeup. So you want to use analytics to give each individual player their own personalized, player development routine or plan.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you brought up the younger levels, because we do have coaches and parents and players that coach younger kids, travel, high school. They don't, sometimes they can't have everything, but I don't think you need to. I think you just start slow, like you just were talking about, and work. Just think about it. If they were just working on that area in the pitching aspect, pitching is number one in the game, obviously. You can't pitch. If you don't have pitching, you're not going to succeed. I mean, everybody knows that because you got to out hit more than you give up. So now we have that for our coaches, but you mentioned game management. You were in game management a lot. Today's game has really changed because of analytics, and I think for the positive, but I think also sometimes we got to look back at some things, and I'll give you an example. Two things that have changed, and you tell me if I'm heading in the right direction. One, we know there's very little bunting going on, and we know the reasons, right? Man on first, you bunt them over early in the game, makes no sense. Plus, the odds of scoring them from second, the percentages go down. You can speak to that. But there are times where bunting can help, or the same thing with stealing. You don't see stealing as much. Now, but we're trying to, like even the commissioner's office, they're trying to change rules to increase stealing now, which doesn't make any sense, because if the analytics say don't steal at that time, now they want to increase the stealing. So it can get a little confusing and mind-boggling for some coaches. Talk a little bit about the base stealing, the bunting, some of the changes in the game, why they occurred, and what the percentages may be.
Yeah. So one of the beauties of baseball, it's almost near miraculous that if the base, first base, second base, were just an inch or two farther away, the whole game would change. If it was, an inch or two closer, the whole game would change. It's amazing how precise you have to be.
They call it the game of inches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's so precise now that to steal a base, like the jump speed you get, the read of the when the pitcher is starting their motion, you have to be very precise to make it worthwhile. So there are two, from an analytic perspective, there are two kind of levers. One is if you need to score just one run, that's one lever of sac flies, bunting, things like that to move the runner other. The other lever is if you need more than one run. So if you need, to get a lot of runs, then bunting, trying to steal may not be worth it. But if you just need that one run, which I think this year, 2020, with starting extra innings runner on second, I think you are going to see more of that. You need just one run and you're going to win. And I think I have started seeing some of the bunting to get them to third, to try to get a sac fly home, or even a base hit. You don't always score from second, especially if it's the end of game. You're going to throw to the plate no matter what. But it's one of those things where the analytics say don't steal, but that's since it's, again, the aggregate across all base runners, all situations, the numbers say it's not worth it to steal. But if you have Buxton running, or some other fast player, Billy Hamilton from a year or two ago, the chances of them stealing are higher. If you have Javier Baez defensively, your chances go down. If you have different catchers with better pop times and so on. So you want to look at the actual situation and make that decision.
So you guys have, basically what you're saying is you have the analytics on the catcher. So it tells you everything about that particular catcher. The runner, the lead he takes, the distance, and also the jump and how long it takes from get it second. The tag, whatever, I don't know if you want to call it tag rate, but the bias tag ability, you have all that calculated, which then gives you the percentage of the chances of that person stealing that base.
Yeah, definitely. How the release time for the pitcher, it's all factored in.
What do we need managers for then? No, I'm kidding. I'm going to get a bunch of emails on that one. No, we need managers. Trust me. But sorry, Ari, go ahead.
Yeah, no, managers are great. Since again, this is just information. Your manager, information, they're like the conductor of the orchestra. They're making the decisions in real time. They're humans after all, and being a psychologist, being a mentor, being a teacher, being an authoritarian, like in the right situation is what managers are for. It's, keeping the team together and on the road during long games this season through the COVID challenges. It's like a guidance of the talent and putting your strengths, aligning your strengths where they need to win for the long haul. But what people may not realize is all those things that you mentioned, the primary lead, the secondary lead, the pop time of the catcher, every time someone's on base, it's being automatically recorded by Major League Baseball advanced media technology called Hawkeye. Last year's it was TrackMan. Every time someone gets on base, it's recorded, and every team gets that. It's incredible, the amount of information.
And then every team has their people go through it, organize it for the manager, and then the manager has it all at his disposal.
Definitely, yeah.
Let me ask you this. This will be interesting because folks know I'm a bit, obviously it's called baseball outside the box. So, I've been in the game 37 years, but I don't call myself a traditionalist. There's certain things I believe maybe the game should still keep, but I'm in favor. I have no problem with doubleheaders, 7 innings. I have no problem with the extra inning rule. We implemented the extra inning rule, I don't know if you remember, for the very first time at a high level at the Olympics in Beijing in 2008, simply because we needed the games to finish for sponsors, for television. They're not going to let baseball in the Olympics unless it's a shorter game because it's the only one that they don't know when it ends. How has that changed for you when it comes to analytics, the extra inning rule? Because from what I've seen in the last 8 days, no doubt about it, there's more bunting. The managers are still learning how to use that rule because it looks easy, but it really isn't because, nowadays guys aren't working on bunting. So you got to make sure you have somebody that can bunt. I know the other day yesterday there was I think there was a mistake, and I'm not going to say who, but again, it's secondary. I don't like to manage after the game, but it's kind of neat to go through it to learn from it, because there was a man on second. The team was a visiting team, and he wasn't the fastest guy in the world, and they didn't pinch run for him, and that cost them the game in the end. Of course, easy for me to say after the fact, but I think it's important to look at that. How's that changed from a standpoint of analytics? Have you had to start changing some things for the extra inning rule?
Yeah, and I know which game you're talking about.
Yeah, I figured you would.
Yeah. And I saw your comments on Facebook.
And it's a good, matter of fact, the manager has been with us internationally coaching, great guy. Look, I'm going to go on TV or online saying it. I don't manage in the big leagues, and I would never second guess managers. I love to study it and put it out there to say, what would you have done in that situation, and see what happens.
Yeah. And interestingly, I've helped with a lot of managerial searches. Like with the Cubs, it's publicly known, but yeah, we would create kind of analytic situational, and just say, it's a runner on second, it's a tie game. Do you pinch run somebody or not? And if so, who? Here's your lineup.
Wow.
And there's no right or wrong answer. You just kind of see what's going through their mind. Are they holding up and getting angry at you? And, so things when they're doing the interview. So we would do these situational, we'd even have a video set up, play
Wow.
it, pause, saying, what are you thinking? But yeah, in this case, it's a tie game. The reason you do the pinch runner is, as we know, runner on second on a hit is not guaranteed to score. If it's if it's over the outfielder's head, yeah, or in the gap. But that kind of weighs against if you think the game might go extra innings. How many bench players do you have? What's the value of this player being put into the game possibly for a few more innings? And you kind of weigh that all. But what I'm seeing teams now is we don't know how many more games there'll be. We do know there's, going to be like, I forget how many are left, but, roughly 50 games left if it's a full season. So things like your durability of your players are less of a factor. You could overuse your bullpen, overuse your starters a little bit more now, since it's more like a sprint. So that's kind of how analytics are looking at the season differently, almost like try to win every game in and of itself. Like
especially now. I mean, now is even critical with 60 games. And folks, so for the ones that do like to criticize, understand, I think it's better to be constructively critical and look at it, but make the decision before the manager on TV makes the decision, because that's what I do. I'll make that decision first, write it down, and I'm wrong a ton of times. But also, don't forget, we don't know the behind scenes information, the players, how they're feeling, what they have, there's so much information in the dugout that we're not aware of. So it's easy for us to say this, but no doubt analytics helps. The other thing I was going to say was, well, no wonder I've got friends who have interviewed with major league clubs, and no wonder it's 6-hour interviews, 10-hour, 3-5 days, that's fantastic. Why not know how a manager will deal in that situation? But then you could also go back and look at games. I'm sure your analytics tell you what happened in past games and decisions they made and the percentages of success they've had, right?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as part of the managerial search, when did they call for pitch outs? Were they bunting or not? And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but in some cases, yeah, there are trends that you could see.
Yeah, there's percentages of success.
Yeah, and how did they do it as a team? Like how did in addition to individual players, like that example of pitching injuries, do pitchers do they learn new pitches when they go through your pitching coach? Do they tend to lose command across all pitchers in the organization? Or is your strategy, to swing away, or do your batters tend to get more patient, wait for a pitch to drive if they don't get it? A pitch they can hit, walk, let the next batter have an opportunity. things like that are kind of organizational philosophies.
Of course, all this stuff you could throw out the window if the players don't execute too, right?
Yeah, totally. And that's one thing, where, people say scouting is, does things analytics can't. That's exactly right. You need to look for players that can take constructive feedback and coaching and say, you know what, thanks, Peter. That's a good point. And you don't want players, and this happens a lot at the major league levels, to ignore not just the analytics, but ignore their own hitting coach. Just say, I was the best in the minors. I don't need your advice. Or what are you kidding me? Raise my elbow? I'm not going to do that. But you want players that, if they have a point, yeah, let them push back and let them tell you what they're feeling and have a conversation. But from a scout's perspective, looking at players that are, do have that personality of, positivity, being able to adjust, is something to be said for scouting.
Ari, what about, you hear a lot now, this is being talked about a lot, and especially among coaches. I've talked to major league managers, past managers about this. The game's changing and we know why, but we're getting a lot of home runs. We're getting high strikeout ratios when it comes to hitters, the highest ever strikeouts in the game of baseball, which can diminish viewership because people can get bored from that. But where does the analytics play into this? Because we understand it takes time for a hitter. They got to train to hit the other way, especially even with the shifts. We understand that part, but where's the analytics play this? Is analytics at fault because of something, why they're doing this, or is analytics trying to change? And I'm going to preface it with this. The teams that I've seen win the World Series hit the ball all over the place. Chicago Cubs, Houston Astros, Boston Red Sox. I think, and I'm not an expert, but from what my vision saw, they hit it everywhere. They just don't pull the ball all the time. So where does analytics play in all this?
Yeah, I would say analytics has been like the driving force for these changes in the game. The strikeout rates, even shifting, which affects other rates. In the NBA, more 3-point shots than 2-point shots dramatically. You'll probably start seeing in football the Eagles going for it on 4th and short. But yeah, in baseball, the way the game's being played has changed due to the analytics and due to having general managers and managers being more analytically inclined. Now, that being said, it's a game of adjustment, always has before. 100 years ago, game of adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
So the game's going to continue to adjust. I think, you'll see more of the shifts. You'll see like what Tampa Bay's doing with like the opener, or, having a 5-man rotation is just the way we've always been doing it. But some athletes might be better, pitching every 3 games or 4 games. So there might be some tweaks around that.
So is analytics in favor, I guess, is it shown in favor of hitting the ball, spraying the ball all over the place, or where it's pitched, or is it in favor? I mean, I know this is a general question. What's it really in favor of showing?
Yeah, it depends whose analytics. My analytics align with you in that if you can spray it all over the field, shifting against you is going to be much more difficult. And as with the Orioles, Chris Davis would hit ground balls, near first and second dramatically. So, it's a challenge. It's not just say, hey, Chris, hit it to all fields. It could never happen. It could take weeks. It could take a couple months to happen. Or, hey, bunt against the shift. There's nobody at third base. Even show a bunt just to mix things up. But yeah, the more you could hit to all fields, the less the defense can protect against that, and the better you'll be as a hitter.
What's your take on, I know it hasn't happened yet, but the thought process, which I personally, at least right now, I can be convinced another, I'm not in favor of mandating certain positions have to play at certain spots because of the shift. I think the players need to adjust, and the minor league system needs to adjust and start teaching guys to hit to all fields, because, MLB's thinking about changing the rules where the shortstop has to stay at a certain spot, or second baseman and all that.
Yeah, I'm open-minded, but Yeah, I almost feel like let baseball be creative. There's no real reason why you need to have so many defenders to the left and to the right of second base. Um,
Yeah, it's your fault if you can't hit the other way. I mean, then it's your problem, right? I mean, you should learn how to hit the other way, maybe.
yeah, my brain. You saw my brain kind of think for a second. I had a flashback to the
Yeah.
Communist Court, which was like a legendary, like softball players. And when and I was part of charity events where we would play. It was a really cool, for kids in hospitals coming out in wheelchairs, stuff like that. But they would at times only have 3 fielders plus the pitcher,
Mm.
and they would just play wherever they wanted to. And I thought that was the greatest thing. And maybe that's why I'm biased, but yeah, I think you should be able to have people play, wherever they want. And mind you, players are scrunched up together. Sometimes that's hard to communicate. You're worried of bouncing into each other or calling for who has it. So it's not just an advantage. You have to really know how to play in different positions. But I'm more for, letting people field wherever they want. And then it's up to the batter to be able to bunt or hit it where they're not.
Absolutely, because I look at the shift. I mean, people have shifted and then forgot to cover third base or forgot to cover second because they were out of position and they didn't communicate who was going to cover that. So, yeah, there's a lot of different complicated issues there. Ari, where is okay? So I'm all for analytics. I think it's great. I think it's going fantastic. I think it'll help the game more than hurt it if used properly. Where's it going now? Where are we heading with analytics? No, before we do that, what are most teams using the same analytics now? So we're kind of right there. And now people are trying to figure out what's next. You're trying to always to figure out the next best thing that somebody else doesn't have.
Yeah, totally. So it's an interesting time in baseball where everyone has access to the same information at the major league level. At the minor league level, it's kind of scattered where these sensor taking devices. And then each team has their own unique data. For example, injury information that due to HIPAA laws, you can't always share, performance, workload. There are certain labs where players can come in and, get certain measurements. There's scouting reports that teams own and other teams don't. So there's a mixture of information everyone has and information that it's proprietary. Every team now has 1 or 5 or 10 or even 20 data scientists, analysts that are trying to get that competitive advantage. But the questions you want to answer are on the field, kind of everything we talked about. How do you shift your lineup? How do you swing and so on? And then above the field, which is kind of like the money ball, what players should we get? How much money should the contract be? Is Mookie Betts worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Is Peter worth 3 million or 6 million? That's another analytics. And then on the business side, how do you price tickets? How do you keep season ticket holders? How do you get sponsorships? Pricing of your food, the Fanalytics, the online gaming, the DraftKings, which went public and is worth $10 billion plus. So that's all where analytics are today. So I'll pause. We can talk about the future too.
No, yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because, it's life. It's today's life. And if you don't get on board, in my opinion, if you don't get on board, you're going to fall behind. Now, nobody says that you have to know this stuff 100%. That's why you hire good people. There's a lot of ways to do this. And if you're a younger coach, start slow, start with what's most important and work your way up. Because I know that I get overwhelmed also from some of this stuff. I just want to mention, I love that you brought up football because I've spoken at conferences and I believe, I don't remember the name, but the high school coach in Alabama who's very successful, he challenges every status quo. He's been punting, he's been going on 4th down. He doesn't punt. They go for it most of the time. He doesn't believe in kickoff. He goes onside kicking all the time, and he's proven all these facts. It's on YouTube. Fantastic. He's got 140 some wins, whatever it is, and I mean, the facts are the facts. NFL has gone to him to study some of the things that he's done. So I love that you brought that up. I did want to bring up, as far as I want to get into the artificial intelligence, but not yet. What do you see on the field, some of the, and maybe you may not be able to give this out. And if you can't, that's fine. I certainly understand it. But some of the, something new coming up that maybe you're studying to see that can help the game also on the field with managing and coaching.
Yeah, so this year, Major League Baseball Advanced Media is introducing totally new technology called Hawkeye. So the people watching baseball are familiar with Sport Vision, started out, with a ball or a strike. TrackMan, improved upon that with some of the defensive measurements. And then Hawkeye this year is using cameras around the stadium so you could look at and record biomechanical information, where the eyes are, where the neck is, where the elbow, the shoulder. So you can get things like bat speed, the swing, the plane of your swing. Was your elbow tucked in when you swung?
In real game.
In real games without having to wear sensors on the body, which in high school, college is allowed, but not in major league. How the outfielders, how their stride legs are. When before the pitch is thrown, is the shortstop getting set position, and when, everything like that. Every single limb from the pitcher's perspective. And so that's automatically being recorded for every pitch, tens of times per second. But you still need data scientists to help figure out what is valuable or not. And you also need what we call domain experts. These are the coaches. These are evaluators. These could be former players, helping out with the effort to see, this pitcher has this movement, this pitcher has, more of a sidearm. That's information. It takes domain experts to see, given the situation, what's good, what's not, what can you do with that? Should we adjust? If so, how? Why should we adjust? So it's like everyone working together would be the ideal. People that can collect the data, that's hard to do. People that can put the data into a database, that's hard to do. Data scientists to find trends, and then coaches and domain experts to figure out what's important, what's not. I remember when we were first looking at outfielder range and running speed, they would say, the average speed of the center fielder is, X. And I said, wait a minute, you're counting, lazy fly balls where you don't have to run. You should only consider their speed when, it's a tough play and really going all out for the ball. Otherwise, it's just kind of noise. So it takes observations like that, people to poke holes, so you can constantly improve. So that's kind of what's next. Is this Hawkeye just started? It's going to take many years, many years in the majors, and then getting it in the minors to really see what's valuable, what skills kind of peak at certain ages, what skills are, we're talking about spraying to all fields. It's hard to see, is it bat speed that does it? Is it how you position your body in the batter's box? Is it the timing of your front foot? People have hunches in the game, but this will help shed some light on that.
Absolutely. And, I just can't see how you can't use it. If you're at the big league level, especially, and you've got all this accessible to you, I mean, it's unbelievable information. Why would you not want that? And I understand as managers, sometimes you have to use your human instincts too. But if you have the data info and now you're using your instincts and your experience, boy, you've got more information than anybody. What do you say to the people out there that might say, the game's been around 100 years. Teams are still winning 105 games max, 106, whatever it is. Nobody's really, you don't have more batters hitting over 300 than you did in the past. You certainly don't have, we know we don't have more 300 game winners, but that's because they're not pitching as much. But what do you say to those people that say, I really don't need this stuff? I mean, I can do it without it.
Yeah, well, I hear where they're coming from. And there's certain things to be said that at the end of the day, you're athletes and playing a game, but, there is information, and I've encountered this, I still do, that could be extremely helpful. When I have a GM that is against this. I say, you know what? Forget about the game for now. If I could help you in a negotiation, tell the agent this player's worth only $3 million versus $6 million. Then the GM's like, okay, great, that I buy into. And then you gain the trust, and then you say, like I've had been cursed off the field when I talk to a certain pitching coach, saying, I'm a major league pitching coach. You can't tell me a F damn thing.
Right.
And
I've been there.
the GM say, geez, you are harsh on Ari. And then he came
Yeah.
back the next day. He's like, all right, the GM said I was a bit harsh on you. Tell me something I don't know. And I'm like, with all due respect, I don't know what you don't know what you don't know. I'm like, all right, how about this? This opposing batter takes the first pitch, even though it's a strike. He takes it 95% of the time. And then his face got red. He goes, that's an effing lie. You are BSing me. There's no way. And then sure enough, all 5 plate appearances, he took the first pitch strike. And he came back the next day. He goes, I'm so sorry. I believe you now. And he's like, tell me the next thing. And then I started. So just saying patterns is helpful. One of the other things I do, it's an offshoot of analytics. It's called a knowledge base or an expert system, where different people have different tendencies. So I talked with Cal Ripken for many years, but he would tell a certain tendency. I work with Earl Hershiser, and he said some pitchers throw their first pitch low and then climb the ladder. I talked with Rod Carew for 6 hours one day, and he told me his strategies of some pitchers would pitch inside, and if you didn't hit it, he would just pitch inside to you the rest of the at-bat, where other pitchers go in and out. And with that information, I would write a program that would look and see, do pitchers exhibit certain patterns, keeping inside on the hands or switching inside outside? Do pitchers double up on curveballs? And that's the type of information, no matter how old school you are, if you get information like that, this pitcher doubles his curves, you're going to want that information.
Absolutely.
It may not be analytics to you, but it's game information.
And on the flip side, folks, if that's my pitcher, I want to know he's doing that. So we may have to change that, because otherwise the other team is understanding that he's doing that.
Yeah, totally. You want to self-reflect. And that's one thing I recommend. Each team has their own scout. Some people call it quality control scout.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of call it an advanced scout for your own team, where you just pretend you're with your opponent. And if you're your opponent watching yourself, how would you scout yourself? What tendencies could you pick up, and then relay it? Hey, Darvish might be tipping his pitches.
Interesting, because I've told coaches, one of the things that we need to do as coaches, we need to find a mentor who evaluates, and I'm just talking about in general, who evaluates us in game and in practice, so we understand how we can get better at what we're doing. So it's interesting you brought that up. I'm on the same page with you. Now, how about, let me throw this at you. Let me see if I'm right or wrong. I'm not, again, I'm just going to say it. I'm not a big believer in big contracts. I remember the A-Rod contract, I'm spending $300 million. I get it from the agent's standpoint. The agent's got a package this big showing you how much money you're going to make on T-shirts and this and that in sales. But this is what's great about analytics, because I'm assuming, and I'm going to assume you're going to tell me the answer, that analytics changes that, because I'd much rather take that money and spread it amongst, some pretty good players on my pitching staff, on maybe a hitter here and there. Where does analytics play with that? Is it showing? A great one would be Mookie Betts, the signing they had. I mean, the Dodgers already have a lot of great players. Now they got him. Where does this play in with analytics?
Sure. So incredible question. So, through the earlier stages of my career, kind of pre-Moneyball, the adage was you pay for past performance. So it's called descriptive. You're describing what happened in the past. And that sometimes works, but sometimes, moving into the future, it may not always be the case. So using artificial intelligence, data science, machine learning, you want to project what might happen in the future and how risky is that. So that's prescriptive. And that's where artificial intelligence is really good at. Is that on his statistics, or is that on the game or the team winning also at the same time and maybe winning the whole thing? Yeah, it's a little of each.
Okay.
So, you know, the agents are, you know, they like to bring up anecdotes of, you know, when this player was pitching, you know, the team won X%, even though sometimes it is partly to do with the pitcher, partly to do with others. You know, if they get all-star appearances and so on, it does help with sales. So you know, using artificial intelligence, you can kind of tease out nuances of every pitch they made, every swing they made, how even the non-players, how does what you do compare to others? So people of a certain makeup, people of a certain characteristic, scouts are saying, you know, hey, he's like Dwight Gooden or Ben McDonald with his curveball. And the analytics are saying the same thing. He's like Dwight Gooden. And then you could say, you know, like Anthony Rizzo at AA, you know, one of the analysis I did, comparing what he did to other AA players at his age, at his progression. Fast forward, how do other people, based on what we know at the moment, you fast forward, were they likely all-stars? Yeah, so the analysis is yes, Anthony Rizzo, based on what we know, how he's doing at AA, is very comparable to other players that are everyday all-stars. And I was able to make that determination earlier on in people's careers and with other players. So
Ari, real quick, sorry, artificial intelligence, explain that a little bit, what that means.
yeah, so traditional analytics is kind of what happened. You got a hit here, you did a sacrifice there. That's traditional analytics. Artificial intelligence is where you could take as much information as you want. It could be a scouting report, the text. It could be an injury report. It could be a photograph of the guy's stance or the person's release point. It could be metrics of scouting reports, like the grading scale, 20 to 80. It could be intensive metrics like, spin rate, spin direction, how much they vary the spin. And artificial intelligence can take millions or billions of data points, find trends in the information that would be nearly impossible for a human to find, and come up with nuances. So for example, I'm working with Rapsodo, the high-speed camera company. You take their information, and for every individual player, every high schooler that you're evaluating to draft, you could see what their strengths and weaknesses and habits and what's changed lately, which would take days or weeks or months or never to do. So artificial intelligence understands the nuances and kind of gives you a blueprint of insights.
We're talking about a crystal ball that you're going to see where he's going to be in the future, basically.
Yeah, you're saying based on, it's called training the data, based on, 10,000 other high schoolers that Rapsodo or, other sensor devices have done. We know, if you exhibit these characteristics, you're more likely to get drafted.
Is this going on now, or is it something that's going to be worked on, is being worked on?
Yeah, I would say in some ways it's going on now. What's going on now is information that was collected 5 or 10 years ago, since it takes that long from going to high school to making the majors. But what's going on right now are, we're 1 or 2 or 3 years into this new data. So these players have not quite gone through that life cycle of making the majors, but at least now we could say which players exhibit certain behavior that get drafted, that get signed, that can make it to AA at this stage. So It's got many more years to keep getting better at this.
Sure, and I asked that because I'm thinking, high school players, how do you tell if a player can handle either signing, to go to pro ball out of high school, or should he go to college instead because of the maturity level and all that? I mean, it doesn't calculate that kind of stuff.
Right, and unless you have it as something you ask the scouts to consistently record, maturity level, grade it, whatever it is, maturity level, yes or no, maturity level, 20 to 80. And if you get enough scouts to grade it, the artificial intelligence will use that as one of the factors. If, let's just say mature, yes or no. If he's mature and can throw a pitch 95 miles an hour, versus not maturing throws 95 miles an hour, artificial intelligence can say, that's a 5% difference or 20% difference in your likelihood.
Wow. How young can you go with something like this?
Well, the younger you get, the more kind of randomness there is. But yeah, I've used it on 15-year-olds. When I say used it, I've used it, from Little League up, but actually recommended signing a 15-year-old or multiple 15-year-olds,
Wow.
from other countries when you're.
Yeah, Latin America, especially. I was thinking Dominican Republic and some other areas.
Yeah. So, and it's a bet a little bit higher risk, but yeah, you could, spend over $1 million to sign, 15-year-olds.
Yeah, and especially nowadays with all the money that's out there, it's a huge investment, and this is really going to help you understand. It's mind-boggling. When you said artificial intelligence, the first thing came to my mind was I've listened to Elon Musk several times on Joe Rogan, and I'm thinking, well, now they're gonna be implanting something in the brain. You don't even have to give signs anymore because just read the manager's mind, and as he's thinking, he's going to tell you exactly what you should be doing on the field. That'll save us some time when it comes to when they're talking about the games are too long. Well, forget the signs. You don't have to give them anymore. That's what I was thinking.
It'll be 3.5 hours instead of 4-hour games.
That's right. Ari, what else? This has been unbelievable. The artificial intelligence is obviously way out there. Well, you did have, I did want to ask you this, and you don't have to mention names, but I'll mention one name that I really like. He's the Chicago guy. Obviously, they won the World Series. Mike Rizzo. I've listened to him on television with other GMs. I really, and I think he's got the right path. Obviously, he uses human analysis with his scouts, along with all the data and all that. But without names, is the industry pretty much on with most GMs on this and staying with it? Because I would think the ones that aren't winning would really want to stay with it.
Yeah, it's I would say it's I'm gonna say the positivity aspects of analytics are here to stay. Like that example, if you could see patterns of what your opponent's going to do, you're going to be in a better position to win more. If you have analytics to help save your money and not sign a long-term huge contract, which kind of ties up the money of your ownership or hitting that, revenue sharing, the caps and so on, those taxes, you're going to be better positioned to win. If you're in a smaller market and you have less, more risk, so you can't take the chances, that's going to help. But yeah, Mike Rizzo's great. I've known him forever, and his late father being in Chicago. So I sat next to him games, probably 100 times. When my wife went into labor for the first time, I was sitting next to him, and you can't leave the game as a scout. And I go, Mike, I am leaving this game. I don't care. My wife's water just broke. And he's like, all right, good luck. So that was really fun. But, great guy. And he knew, I wouldn't say they got lucky, but, one play here or there, they wouldn't, you don't progress through the playoffs. But that being said, put together an incredible team, got some great players for the long haul. And he uses, scouts, to some degree analytics as well. So there's something to be said with everything.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing the industry change also. You're seeing a lot more younger managers, probably, I would assume, because they might be a little bit more open-minded to the analytics than some of the managers that have been around a long time. I'm not saying that the managers that have been around don't use it, but the young ones might. You had one in your class, Mike Matheny. Obviously looks like a very smart individual. Tell me about that a little bit.
Sure. So I teach classes with sports management worldwide, smww.com. I have one on baseball analytics, one, more hardcore on data science, artificial intelligence. But a great story, which I give a lot of respect to Mike. He was very successful manager with the Cardinals, made the playoffs, was it the first 4 years, which I don't think had been done, but, he made the playoffs, as a player as well, world champion. But he was extremely open to grow as a person, to listen, to see, what truly are his ways he can improve or what's the perception. One of them was, analytics. He's kind of, wasn't as versed in it. So he said, how can I improve? And he heard about my class, ended up taking it. At first, it was like anonymous. People, it could be a little, I don't know, embarrassing, or people could write about it on social media.
Yeah.
But then, like after the first class, he's like, this is great. I'm just going to let everyone know I'm taking it. And like other students, like, wow, Mike Matheny's on this. Participated very well, and it exposed him. The class talks about, everything we've been talking about, but you actually kind of roll up the sleeves, take a look at what the data looks like, learn a little bit of the skills, things called SQL, Python, R, data science, data robot. So you get exposed to a lot of that and how it's actually used day to day. And then I also did coach him, kind of mentor, talk with him on the side above and beyond the class. And, he ended up, so first of all, having that humbleness and willingness to learn is an inspiration to me. It's hard for anybody to kind of open up and say, hey, I know I'm not as good at this. So I'm trying to learn myself. It was inspirational to me. But then, during his incoming managerial, interview, his first press conference, he mentioned me and my class, which was great. And he still keeps mentioning it, which is good. And we still are in touch. But I really like that. And I hope anyone listening, whether it's, you don't have to take my class, I'd love you to be part of it. But, whatever it is, just seek out, ways that you can improve yourself, whether, it's within the game, outside the game. I'm striving myself to do more of that.
And that's what I wanted to ask. And this we'll finish it off with this, and then you could add anything you want at the end here. But I wanted to ask, with some coaches out there or individuals, doesn't mean you don't have to be a coach in any sport. We're going to put all the show notes, and also on social media. We'll put your Twitter, we'll put your information out there. How to go, whether it's your class or anything else you're doing. But let's just use you for the example. I mean, a great example, obviously, you've done this a long time. If somebody was going to start off for the first time getting into this, maybe has a little background in it, what would you recommend doing? Going to your website, going to your class? What's a good starting point, I guess, is where I'm getting? Reading a certain book?
Yeah. Well, there's, different things. Of course, go to my class, smww.com. Like, I'm an instructor. Dan Duquette, the former GM of the Expos, we worked together. Red Sox, Orioles, where we worked together. Dan Evans, the former GM of the Dodgers. So
Chicago guy.
Host.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Started Chicago guy, Lane Tech, high school. Worked with the White Sox, and then made his way up through the Dodgers. All different instructions. But for data science, for analytics, it's good to first just get exposed to what's out there. That's what the course is great for. But short of the course, a lot of great books out there. One is called Big Data Baseball, about the Pittsburgh Pirates and how they started using technology and a lot of the resistance with players to shifting. Fred Clare just wrote a book, Extra Innings, with his viewpoints going from when he started up through now, and there's a couple chapters on analytics. The Hot Hand, which Ben Cohen, Wall Street Journal writer, has a couple chapters with me in it, but just talking about how analytics in all sports are taking over. Those are kind of good reads. And then, the next question is if you actually just are interested in it, or if you want to, you're a coach or what have you, start doing stuff. There are some solutions, technology out there, like Blast Motion is a device you can put on your players' bats. I think it's like $150.
Yep, got one sitting right there.
Yeah. So it's not going to break the bank.
What about conferences? Are there conferences on analytics where you listen to different speakers?
Yeah. So I never say the nice thing about a pandemic, but SABR, SABR, is an organization where they hold conferences. The nice thing of being locked down is it's virtual, so you don't have to travel to Arizona or Boston. So go to sabr.org, and I listened in the last few, and they were free. So I think they're all free. There are local chapters, but for now, and they just have different speakers, different use cases. The last couple I've been to, Major League Baseball, has been great to have people talk and give videos. What is Hawkeye like? So Sabre is a great organization to belong to. Go to Rapsodo. They have, I think they just launched the, high school, college players from all over the country and kind of their rankings and what metrics are good or not. But Rapsodo is something you could get certification on, something that's not too costly that you could set up either for your games or your side sessions. So there's some technologies out there that you could install yourself. Driveline Baseball is another one. They are just coming out with, from your iPhone, the ability to take videos of your players or yourself and do analysis from that. And of course you could always do that, but I'm talking about analysis that used to cost $30,000 for setting up. Now you could do just from your phone.
Wow.
So the barriers to entry, so to speak, the cost to get these analytics is coming way down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll continue to do that, just like anything else, right? Buy a TV 20 years ago cost you a lot more than it does now, and they're a lot smaller and lighter, and it's fantastic. Ari, this has been great. And folks, I guess the other thing you do is listen to Brian Kenny on MLB Network. I always like that guy. I would like listening to him. And I love the big league guys kind of, going back and forth a little bit because they'll challenge him at times, and he's sharp, boy. So I think he'd be another one. Obviously, that's free too. You can listen to that, MLB Network.
Great point.
All right, Ari, listen, this has been awesome. I know hopefully this is just show number 1, because I think we can get in this even more as we're going. Hope to have you back, man. I really appreciate your time. I know you've got a lot going on.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was almost an hour and a half, and it seemed like 10 minutes, but
That's right.
A lot more we can keep talking. You're a
great information, man. All right, folks, that is Ari Kaplan. I am Pete Caliendo. Listen, before you end, make sure go to YouTube and subscribe at Peter Caliendo. Do me a favor. The audio will be on baseballoutsidethebox.com. That is our podcast. You can subscribe to both of those. It would really help us. It's all free. And special thanks to Brian Kroc, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Of course, special thanks to our guest, Ari Kaplan. Unbelievable show today. Loved it. It will be all over social media, so we'll get all the information out, even on Ari. Don't forget, our team, hopefully we are having a team going to Cuba. Caliendo Sports International will be traveling to Cuba at Christmas if everything goes well with the pandemic. If you're interested, send me an email at caliendo19@gmail.com. We've had several series on Cuban baseball. And finally, stay healthy, be safe. Hey, don't forget, please. I always say this on the show, and I'm hoping people are listening. Stay healthy, drink plenty of water, exercise. It's a great time to do it. Take vitamin D, take your vitamins. I've gone over and over it with you. Doctors aren't telling you this enough. I know we need to wear a mask. I know we need to not touch our face. We got all that, but we need to stay healthy. Your immune system needs to be strong. Do your homework on this. Great time to create a great habit, and you'll love it, and it's for your own benefit and your own health. So again, special thanks to Ari Kaplan. We will see you folks on tomorrow's show. I'm Pete Caliendo, your host. God bless you all. See you tomorrow.